Martha Simmons with another session of Preaching and Preachers on Facebook Live. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. It is a sunny day here in Atlanta, and I think I'm about a minute early, but I am here because I've got a great broadcast to offer today. So I'm going to give folk a minute to come on in. Good afternoon. I hope it is as sunny where you are as it is here in Atlanta. Come on in, and let me know that you are out there. Come on in. Make sure I got the chat feature turned on so people can weigh in once they come in. Come on in and let me know that you are out there. If you are joining on YouTube, thank you for joining me. Please like, share, and subscribe to my YouTube page. I really appreciate it. Come on in and let me know that you are out there. Good morning to my people on the West Coast who get up early to check out the broadcast, shouting out the folk in the Midwest. Glad to have you all joining me. Certainly the people on the East Coast, and last but not least, the people in the dirty South. Come on in and let me know that you all are out there. This is going to be a great broadcast. This is, again, practical information that people can use. Come on in and let me know that you are out there. I think I've got everything set up. They change text so frequently that one week you're doing one thing and the next week it's totally different. So I know that we're on Facebook Live via Restream. Restream just changed all of its settings. I don't know why they won't just leave things alone, but we're here. We are here, and we're going to go forward with this broadcast. When you come in, tag another person who you know will be helped by this broadcast. It'll be up on my Facebook page for 3 weeks and up on YouTube for a whole lot longer. So you can check it out. If you couldn't get in today, you can check it out over the next 3 weeks. I think it's going to be practical and helpful. Okay, I'm waiting for folk to come on in. Like I said, sometimes you have to check and recheck to know that things are working clearly on some of these platforms. Come on in and let me know that you are out there. All right. I see that it is live on Facebook. And so we're going to just keep moving forward. Going to just keep moving forward. Like I said, I'm not sure. I'm not seeing people in the chat area. So I'm not sure what's going on there. Not seeing people in the chat area. Okay. Someone just said that they are in. Good. I appreciate that. That lets me know that it is working. Things are working. All right. Reverend Watson, thank you for letting me know that you are in. I appreciate that. All right. Okay, people, there we go. It's hard sometimes, like I said, to figure this out, but everything is working. Reverend Bruce Carroll. All right. I appreciate you all coming in. Appreciate it. When you come in, type in the name of another person who you know will benefit from this broadcast. We're going to talk about why pastors are leaving churches, why, folk are discussing it among themselves. So at least once a year, I want to talk. I do talk about this important area. All right, all right, all right. Going to give folk about 30 more seconds to get on now that I know everything is working well. And today, if you all have questions, go ahead and put them in the chat, and I will get to as many of them as I can. All right, all right, all right, all right. I'm going to go ahead and get started. As always, I am praying for those who are sick, praying for those experiencing a season of bereavement. Particularly, we are praying for the Forbes family and the loss of Mrs. Betty Forbes, the wife of Reverend Forbes, excuse me, Reverend Forbes, and for Bishop John Borders in Boston in the loss of his mother on yesterday. We are praying for them. And last but not least, I am praying for Cuba. And I hope you will join me in doing that. They are in an awful situation last night in one of the central hospitals because they had no power. Everyone in the ICU unit, those people hooked up to ventilators and things like that, those people died. And it's because our administration is blocking their access to oil for that they need to power things with. So it's getting to the level of being catastrophic in Cuba. Please pray for them. Pray for them. All right. Just by way of announcements, next on April 13th, Reverend Timothy Farmer is going to be my guest as he talks about all things tech, what's new, what's old, what's outdated, etc. And he will be there here to answer your tech questions. So don't miss that. And then on April the 20th, I'm going to talk about church mergers. We keep saying churches need to merge and things like that as churches continue to close. So again, we're going to offer you some possibilities with some great guests on how to do a church merger. If you are watching on YouTube, please like, share, and subscribe. And I appreciate you being present. Let's get to it. Let's get to it. Why are pastors leaving churches? There are a bunch of reasons, but there are 6 big ones, or 6 predominant reasons why pastors are leaving churches. The first one is obvious, of course, is retirement. Pastors retire and leave churches around 1993, 95. Pastors were actually retiring early. Retiring for Black pastors, retiring early meant getting out by around 60. They were actually retiring early. And so because I worked at the time, I was working trying to help pastors get churches. I looked at the trend and said, okay, this is a good sign for people who are trying to become pastors of churches, but it didn't last. It really didn't last. I think it might have gone on for 10 years, and then we got right back to where we were today, which means pastors are staying at their churches in their 70s and 80s. That's where we are. And so you've got 2 generations at least of young preachers who are waiting, wishing that churches were open, and they are not. So, of course, number one reason is that pastors retire. You leave a church because you just decided to retire. What's the second reason? The second reason that pastors end up leaving churches is that the church closed. The church closed, okay? And be clear, they are still closing. They are still closing. How many churches closed in 2025? Let me say it this way. I think it was 2024, I said that by the end of 2025, we could expect at least 10,000 churches to close. But according to Axios, the Baptist Courier, Pew Research, and the National Councils of Churches, they predicted much larger numbers. And so we got closer to their numbers than my numbers. I said 10,000. They said 15 to 25,000, and they were right. They were right. Okay. And although the religious decline is slower for Black churches because we just will hold on longer for a variety of reasons, the decline is still happening. So by December 2026, it is clear from all of the measures, and you don't have to take my word for it, it's all online. By December 2026, another 10,000 churches will close. That's Black churches, white churches, Latinos, Asian, they will close. Okay, so of course, that will be a reason why pastors end up leaving. From time to time, I walk my neighborhood, and it's been really interesting watching churches that have closed and what has happened with those properties. So churches are closing all over the country. Third reasons why pastors are leaving churches, they're leaving because of the national economic downturn. The national economic downturn. And, this number 3 is closely aligned to number 2. We've heard that 300,000 plus Black women have lost their jobs in the last 12 months. And of course, many, many Black men as well. But 300,000 plus, women. And some of those women were clergy. They were clergy, okay? On top of the national economic downturn causing people to lose jobs, it also caused churches to say to their minister, we can no longer afford to pay you full time. We can't pay you full time. And that was senior pastors, ministers of music, executive ministers. They could not pay those people to work full time. They just couldn't pay them. So those who stayed, the pastors who stayed, had to accept part-time pay, and then get a second job in many cases because they had bills to pay and families to support. And, we understand that in any economic downturn, not only does it affect the pastors, but also the people in the pews. But somehow we believe that these economic downturns do not affect ministers. That's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. It affects ministers too. You're watching Preaching and Preachers with Dr. Martha Simmons, now in its ninth year. All right. And we're talking today about why pastors are leaving churches, and that economic downturn is certainly one of the reasons. Okay. The fourth reason why pastors are leaving churches is to go do something else. Just to go do something else. There are individuals who began as senior pastors, and some of you may know some of these names. Emily Town, Reverend Starsky Williams, Reverend William Barber. They were all senior pastors, but they decided to go do something else. Okay, I remember when I met Reverend Starsky Wilson, he was pastoring in St. Louis. Now he's the head of the Children's Defense Fund. Okay, Shakima North, another person I thought about. She was a staff pastor. and she left, and now she leads Covenant House in New York, and she's providing housing and other services, wraparound services for teens, and doing amazing work. So clergy are not leaving ministry, but they are leaving churches to go do something else. Uh, be professors, chaplains, run nonprofits, going into politics, and so many other things. Okay. No matter their new professions, ministers, like I said, they're still ministers. So some will simply no longer serve as a senior pastor or a staff pastor. At least three generations. Generation X, which was born, though that covers people born from 1965 to 1980. Then you've got millennials born from 1981 to 1996, and then Gen Z from 1997 to 2010. That covers Gen Z. These are the generations that are leading in teaching us that you can go and do something else when you are called to ministry. You can do something else. I grew up believing that when you go into ministry, you're either going to be a staff pastor or a senior pastor. That's all we knew. That's all we talked about. But as I decided that I didn't want to be either of those, then I realized I could do some other things and they were still ministry. And I really want people listening today to know that this is the case. Okay. This is the case. You can go do something else. I tell all of my kids, you all can do 2, 3, 4, 5 different things. So go do them. You don't have to be a senior pastor if you don't want to be one. Okay. You can become a therapist. I've got, or a clinician. One of my kids right now is taking the counseling exam this year, and he is currently a senior pastor, but I think he may segue to something else. Okay. Then there are those, like I said, who are choosing just so many areas. Chaplaincy has become a big one that people are using, along with business, law school, etc. So you can go and do something else. Be clear about that. Be real clear. And since this is the case, instead of running to get a D-min, which everybody seems to be doing, consider another career that you would enjoy, that you could segue into. Okay. That you could segue into. The truth is, and I gave you those church closure numbers earlier for a reason. The truth is that churches are going to continue to close, and no one has determined, oh, this is going to run for 10 years, this is going to run for 15 years. It's been happening for a decade, and no one sees an end in sight. So I'd like to say to a lot of young preachers, middle-aged preachers, those waiting, that you may never become a senior pastor. You may never become a staff pastor, not if you want to be paid anyway, especially if you are a woman, or if preaching is not one of your primary gifts. You may never become a senior pastor. That's the direction that the church is headed in. I often on this broadcast remind people of what happened in Europe. All of those clergy, especially the long-term clergy, they thought they'd be clergy forever, and it ended. The churches are going to continue to close. So you really need to know, what else would I enjoy doing? That is ministry. Ministry is more than being a senior pastor. Much more. It's just that the Black church, because of the importance of the senior pastor for our community, that's what we've always thought about. That's what we've always thought about. Okay. And I just really want to push this point because I remember when everyone was saying we're entering the age of technology, get prepared, there are going to be major changes. How many people ignored that? They ignored it and they suffered accordingly across so many fields. Okay. Uh, Churches are going to continue to close. So you need to really think this through and don't just tell yourself, I can only be a senior pastor if I want to legitimately be in ministry. No, if God called you, you are legitimate. You're good. You are good. Okay. But do think about it because, as I said, there are only going to be so many churches open. And remember, I also said pastors are staying longer. So they're 70 and 80. You're trying to get in a spot in your 30s and it's closed, and it'll be closed in your 40s too. Okay. It's like I said, it's difficult to hear. I think there's a saying, it's tight, but it's right. It's right. It's just right. Know that you can do something else. Get a clue. Get a clue. I mean, it's just, oh, it gets on my last nerve. You know, most of you know that I've worked with pastors, preachers to become senior pastors, and I'm at 49 now. And I still get the calls and the messages in my inbox, etc. And I have to really tell people there's not much out there, not that can pay you a decent salary that will feed you, your families, pay your bills, etc. There's just not, and it's just not going to be. So when these good churches, as we call them, do come along that can pay you a full-time salary, that will be a couple of hundred other people who are also going after those churches. So don't box yourself in and let anybody make you believe that the only thing you can do and be legitimate is be a senior pastor or a staff pastor, meaning assistant pastor, executive pastor, etc. You can do other things. Number 5, why are pastors leaving churches? Pastors are leaving churches because too often churches are slow to change. They're just slow to change. I mean, I've seen this again and again. Ministers become senior pastors and they are just excited about what they can do and their plans for churches, and it doesn't work. And we see it with what we've come to call unintended interims. Unintended interim. This is someone who thought that they were going to be there long term, but nothing that they did worked for so many different reasons. It just didn't work. Okay. And the person who came after them, and this is all with explaining the unintended interim, that person was really the pastor. It wasn't the unintended interim who came after probably a person that had been there 20 or 30 years. It was the person after the unintended interim. Excuse me. They became the unintended interim. They meant well, but nothing worked. Absolutely nothing worked. And that's a reality. And we've been watching that reality for the last, I want to say 50 years at least. And I wish somebody would write about it. But it does get discussed in circles that preachers really tried hard and nothing worked. Nothing worked. And also in line with this, and why pastors are leaving churches is that the 7-year rule. We know about the great 7-year rule, right? It takes 7 years to become the pastor, get to know the people, learn the administration, learn the neighborhood, blah, 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 learn all the rituals, the history, etc. Well, young people, and I gave those generations earlier, but especially millennials, the generation after them, they are not taking that. They're not taking that, okay? Um, that it takes 7 years to figure stuff out. In fact, many of them are ready to leave by year 5 if they don't see that they can do any more great ministry at a particular church. And they will just leave. And so the people I've worked with recently, so many of them were ready to leave before year 7. They were ready so that 7-year thing, people are not, they're just not doing it. And I really wish churches came to understand this, and seminaries. I really wish that they would understand everything changes. So that 7-year rule has changed as well. It's like, why? Why? It's like people believing that ministers in their 20s can't do amazing work, despite Martin Luther King changing the whole country in his 20s. It is doable. It is doable, you know. And like I said, no one's really written about so much of this stuff, but I can tell you that definitely from helping place 49 people, preachers are ready to go. If they're not staying, they're getting out of there before year 7. Okay. And they're especially ready to go if the churches are slow moving and stuck. And this makes sense. So much of life has sped up. So the church and how things happen in organizations, period, it's not just churches, corporate organizations, nonprofit organizations, organizations. And I know somebody gonna say the church is an organism. That's right. Okay, that's fine too. The 7-year rule. I'm telling you, the young preachers, they are not doing that. Now, it may be the case. It may be the case. I'm not sure about this, but it may be the case that because so few churches are opening, some may stay longer. But my guess is people are just going to go do something else because they can do something else. They can write books. They can teach in seminaries. They can be chaplains. They can be lawyers. So that they'll go and do something else. Okay. But just know that 7-year rule, forget about it. Forget about it, especially if you get some of the brightest and the best. They're not doing that. They are not doing that. Okay. Let me say a little bit more about churches being slow to change. It is sometimes caused by the fact that the search committee was not honest with the pastor about the direction of the church. And it could be because the search committee never asked anybody. They didn't do a survey. They didn't host any meetings. And they just formed a search committee and said, this is how we're going to find somebody. And so that really was not good for that person coming in the door during interviews and etc. They couldn't really share much with the pastors. So church, I really wish search committees would do a better job. I'm working on, along with my co-author, the Christian Ministers Manual, Volume 2. And we've hit 500 pages. Long way from starting the editing, but 500 pages have been written. And one of the sections that we took great pains to make sure we included was the operation of search committees. We just keep getting this wrong. we keep getting this wrong, okay? So search committees, they didn't tell the preachers anything, and they didn't get any information from the congregation. And also, just as the search committee didn't do their work, preachers too often don't do their work. They don't do any due diligence, okay? They were so thirsty to become a senior pastor. They just wanted to kind of know where was it located, some idea of a salary, could they be full time, and they didn't check out the church. They didn't know its history. They didn't know the tenure of, let's say, at least the three pastors that came before them. And they didn't know if the church. I remember talking to a pastor when their church flooded in Florida. And I asked him, did you know the church was in a floodplain? Okay. He never thought about it. Never thought about it. Okay. And it's all of those kinds of things. You've got to do your due diligence if you're interested in being a senior pastor, and don't believe that you are an exception. If a church fought its last three pastors, they are going to fight you too. They're going to fight you too. Okay. So you're not special, you're not an exception. You really do have to do your due diligence. And I'm going to keep saying this probably at least once a year. Find out. And I'm amazed when preachers call me and say, but I don't know who to ask. It's like, what? We're in the technological age. You can find out now. And if it's an open church, trust me, your colleagues are talking about it. Somebody has that information, some pastor in the city, current members, former members, somebody has the information. You can get the information if you really want to, okay? I'm not a senior pastor, and I've never had a problem getting the information because I wanted to get the information. So, preachers, you got to do your due diligence, or you're going to end up leaving. Okay? And the last thing I want to say in regard to churches being slow to change is that there are churches that do not want to change. And you have to accept that. You have to accept that. I remember saying to one of my kids when they were trying to get a friend to act a certain way, and I said to them, people have a right. Adults have a right to be stuck on stupid. They just have a right. People have a right not to change. And those people are in churches. I've got a church here in Atlanta, one of those 100-plus-year-old churches, never changed. Never changed. I know another one, another couple in New York, never changed. They have never changed. And the truth of the matter is, they don't want to change. They don't want to change. And in the case of both of these churches, the one in Atlanta and those in New York, these are churches that only wanted preachers. They didn't want a pastor. They just wanted you to preach and go home. And that was it. Okay. And too many went in saying, I'm going to go and pastor a church. But the people were saying, no. You're not going to pastor us. We just need you to preach and we'll take care of the rest of it. We've survived for 100 years, blah, 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 blah. And you just got to know. And again, this is part of doing your due diligence. Is finding out the DNA of a church. If a church is 50, 100 years old, their DNA is set. You will know if they're a fighting church, if they're a family church, if they're a social justice church, if they're a church that loves to do missions, if they're churches that believes in women. You'll know if they're homophobic. You will know if you just do your due diligence. There are churches that do not want to change. They don't want to change. And guess what? You can't make them. They're grown. They are grown. You cannot make people change if they don't want to change. There's some churches that have always been run by deacons and trustees, and that's the way they are. And when pastors figure this out, then they leave. And this whole notion of pastors, you know, having to deal with stuff too long is, or the churches that don't want to change specifically. There's not a silver bullet answer. There's not a one size fit all answers. But I understand why pastors give up and leave these churches. I understand. Once you run into one of them, I understand why a pastor will leave. And but before you give up, make sure that you give it a chance. You know, there was a pastor who was here in Georgia, and he was ready to go in 6 months. And I'm like, okay, one or two things happened. Either number one, you didn't do any due diligence, so you don't know anything, you didn't know anything about those people. Or number two, you have not been taught how to hang in there and grow and learn. Okay? You have not been taught anything. He was gone in 6 months. And then there was another one. This hasn't been 12 months ago. He hadn't been at his church 7 months, did the installation and all of that all over Facebook, Instagram, blah, blah, blah. And he was gone. He was gone. Okay. So at least I would say to senior pastors, yes, there are churches that don't want to change. Yes, there are churches that are slow, etc., in figuring things out and catching visions and all of those kinds of things. But at least give it a chance. Okay, at least give it a chance. Call a senior pastor who may have pastored a church like the one you are pastoring. Okay, they may have pastored a very similar churches. There are types of churches. Okay, just as there are types of pastors. So call someone and then spend a season of prayer about it before you just up and leave hurriedly. The other thing, and pastors don't do this enough. Assess your skills. Assess your skills. I'm always amazed when working with pastors, as I have over the last 17 years, who do not know. They did not know their whole skill set. They really, really didn't know. Everybody thought they were a good preacher, and quite a number they were not. That was not their area of gifting. Many were horrible at administration, and they didn't know. They didn't know it. Okay. And I even started telling preachers, because it was just getting ridiculous. I just tell them, look, take that gift assessment test or exam. You've seen the gift assessment thing that a lot of churches do. Different denomination have their own particular type, but at least, and it's pretty clear most of the time in determining who you are relative to ministry and what your areas of gifting really, really are. But I really think preachers need to do that, because they don't know. They don't know their giftings. And so the things that they think they are doing well, they're really not that good at. And nobody's telling you. Nobody's telling you that your preaching is average or mediocre. No one's telling you that you are not good at administration. So you're blaming other people for your failings and then just saying, giving up and just leaving. Okay. But of course, there are times when it is time to go. There are times when it's time to go, and there's nothing wrong with that. Not all pastors were intended to stay at a church forever. Okay. That's not typically what happens with churches. Out of all of my kids, only one of them has remained at the same church uh, for 17 years. But no, I can't even count him now that I think about it, because he was at another church for about 2 years, but he's been at his current one for 17 years. That is not typically the way it goes. And it certainly won't be the way it goes in the future. You may end up at 3 or 4 churches if there are churches open. Okay. Before you find a place that can feed you, your family, and is a fit for you. Okay. Is a fit for you. The final reason that pastors are leaving churches is because they were put out. They were put out. Okay. Years ago, at least say 20 years ago, this is 2026. So let's say at least 20 years ago, uh, certainly 30 years ago, the typical Black church, I don't care if it was Baptist, Presbyterian, I don't care what it was. And I'm not, of course, not talking about the hierarchical churches where bishops place people, but certainly Baptists and similar kinds of churches. Those churches had bylaws and constitutions, but those bylaws and constitutions said almost nothing about how you terminated a pastor. But a few years before COVID, and certainly after COVID, I mean, it's one after another. It's like, I just know this is March. And of course, I heard about someone who was put out. And I'll hear about him in April, May, June, July, August, because it's now become a regular thing. Someone posted when I mentioned this online, and they said it's become an epidemic. And I don't know if it's an epidemic, but I do know that it's happening regularly. It is happening regularly. Okay. And you know, preachers are put out for a variety of reasons. And I'm not talking about preachers who were sleeping with parishioners or stealing money. Of course, they were put out for that. But some of the main reasons that preachers are being put out, and these are preachers with MDivs, DMins, etc., as well as preachers who didn't attend college. Number one, they were not a fit. They were just not a fit. One of the preachers who's been put out in the last 2 years, I remember saying to him that he was not a fit for the church he was very interested in. And he got the church and he stopped speaking to me. But they did put him out. It was not a fit. It was not a fit. The search committee, they didn't do their due diligence to determine what kind of person he was. He didn't do his due diligence in really determining what kind of church that was. He misunderstood the church's DNA, and the church misunderstood his DNA. Let me see here. Pastors should study those bylaws and constitutions. Oh, absolutely, absolutely. But here's what you need to know. Even for the ones that have bylaws and constitutions, etc., they basically will tell you you can be terminated and they'll give you the percentage that they need to hold a vote. Okay. Um, and you can talk about changing them if you want to, and that's often done. But if they want to put you out, they're putting you out. And that's just that. And yes, good bylaws, good constitution, that will help you. But if you're not a fit, they will end up pushing you out. So you're a conservative pastor, but you're ending up pastoring a social justice, highly visible church. That's not a fit. You're not bourgeoisie and your church is. That's not a fit. You're social justice and your church isn't. That's not a fit. Okay. So again, you've got to do your due diligence, make sure you know what you're looking at. Another reason that churches are putting pastors out, and I keep seeing this one, is that too many new pastors are flexing. They're flexing. In other words, they're making major changes overnight. They're talking down to people. They're tearing down structures overnight without replacing them with anything of comparable weight. And sometimes, even when you do have a replacement, you still can't just go in tearing down things. Okay. Um, and the people are like, no, you're not flexing here. And so they'll either put them out, or the pastors will want to leave. Okay. Someone said, or you're charismatic and they're conservative. Yeah, that's the case too. Not a fit. Not a fit. Okay. The other reasons preachers are being put out more now is the numbers keep going down. The numbers keep going down. Okay. Churches are shrinking. Yes, at a point for church leaders, it is about the members and the money. The members and the money. Okay. There was a pastor here in Georgia. When he became the pastor, the church had 150 members, and 12 or 13 years later, they only had 30. And he left because I think he knew they were going to put him out. So if things are continually going downhill, don't be shocked if they ask you to leave. Okay. Another reason, of course, that pastors are put out is that they can't get along with key leaders. They just cannot. They didn't take the time to get to know people. And yes, there are people who they have thrown their weight around. They've been in charge at churches forever. You really do have to know how to deal with those people. Okay. And someone said, why do pastors want to stay where they are not wanted? The same reason people stay at corporate jobs when white folk really don't want them. They need the paycheck. They need the paycheck. And you can make this spiritualizing and etc., but they need the paycheck. Okay. So just be clear. Just be clear about that as well. Again, let me say a little bit more about that key leaders thing. You really do need to go in learning about people. Don't let members tell you this person is like this person is like this. Get to know those people for yourself. Get to know those people for yourself. And you'd be surprised if you spend time with people and get to know their DNA, their backstory, why they are the way they are, why they are. And so you may think that they're trying to control the church, and they may think that they're trying to protect the church. Okay. Then pastors are also being put out because they're not around much. They're just not around much. They're on the road They are working another full-time job. And we're going to continue to see more and more of this as churches shrink. Pastors they cannot give 40 hours for churches that are paying them for 20 hours. Okay. And churches will get bothered by that. They really will. They will get bothered by that. And they think if you have a cell phone, even if you got a second job, you're supposed to be available to them 24/7. Okay. Just know that, and they will come up with reasons. And they'll tell you, you were here, so and so called you when this came up, etc. They are keeping a list. Okay. So just know you're in charge of your own schedule, no doubt, but people do pay attention to that. Okay. And like I said, and that cell phone has really messed up a lot of things. And there are pastors who don't know how to draw boundaries. They don't know how to draw boundaries. So the people think that they can call them anytime, night or day. They think the pastor can be interrupted during the pastor's vacation, all of those kinds of things. And it's because the senior pastor never drew any boundaries. So you cannot blame the people if you didn't draw any boundaries. If you give people an inch, they will take a mile. Churches can be needy. Many members in churches are lonely. Okay. And then there are those in churches who once they held major leadership positions. Everybody knew their name. They were always being talked about. And now that all of that is past, they are grumpy, they are upset, and etc. Okay. Just understand that that does happen. That does happen. So that's another part of being put out of a church. And then, and people hate to hear this, but the preaching just wasn't that good. You got put out because your preaching you had one great sermon and it was that candidacy sermon. And just believe it or not, people will get bothered by your preaching. Now, if your preaching isn't that good, but you are a great pastor, people will look over it. They'll look past it and you'll get to stay a lot longer. But if you're not a great pastor and your preaching is not that great, people will look and say, we can do better than this. Okay. Now, I'm not trying to say that I've got all of the answers about how you can stay, but I am letting you know. And you can go online and look the data up just like I did, and have for years. And you will come to understand that there are some reasons, and they're consistently the same reasons why pastors are put out. They're consistently the same reasons, not any new reason. Okay, consistently the same reasons. So you need to be clear on those things that you need to give attention to and pay attention to. Let me see. You could go ahead and ask your questions if you want to ask a questions. I got a few more moments. And I know too that every situation is different. I do know that. But like I said, there are similarities. There are similarities, just as there's a list of what people, Black people especially, want in or believe equals a good senior pastor. They've got a list of things that they believe and have to say about a bad senior pastor. Okay. And that flexing and never around, not getting along with key leaders. Okay. Just know that those are the constants. They're the constants. They keep showing up again and again and again. as pastors are being asked to lead churches in this season. Let's see, they voted a pastor out because they took his sermons on Sundays and put them into Google and discovered, okay, yeah, we've had some pastors to be put out because they were stealing sermons. Yeah, we know about that. Some big names and not so big names. Yeah, yeah. Like I said, that that sermon stuff is on the list. Either your preaching is bad, you're plagiarizing, all of that. That's in that sermon area. If you've got a question, go ahead. Um, and ask your questions, but just do know, like I said, year after year after year, the reasons are the same. Okay, they're the same 6 or 7 reasons that pastors are being put out, and the same 6 or 7 reasons that pastors are being lauded for their work. It's the same list. So pay attention. Just pay attention to making sure that it's a fit. If it's not a fit, then you can make sure that, and you may have to leave sooner. That's okay. If it's not a fit, it's not a fit. Stop flexing. Watch your numbers. Numbers matter. Don't fool yourself. You know, and just tell yourself, oh, well, I'm doing the best I can, and the people aren't helping me. I hate to tell you that the people are putting it back on you. So the membership numbers and the budget numbers keep going down. That's a red flag. Could be a problem. And then you've got to learn to get along with key leaders. Some of them you may not like much, but you've got to learn to get along with key leaders, etc. Okay, I've said to several pastors in the last year that they needed to take some conflict resolution classes. Just take the classes, because you can't just go into one meeting after another and the meeting blows up, blows up, blows up, blows up. You can't pastor that way. You can't pastor that way. Okay. Someone asked, if you're following a long-term pastor, how do you lead carefully because you want to stay long as well? A couple of things about following a long-term pastor. Number one, do not try to make that pastor disappear in the minds and hearts of the people. And I've seen this too many times, you know, um, people taking portraits off walls, those kinds of things, people moving furniture immediately. Honor your long-term pastor. Honor the long-term pastor, and hopefully you all can even develop a strong collegial relationship. Now, that does not mean that they will be able to butt in and help you run the church, but honor that person. Never try to get rid of that person in the minds of the hearts and the people. Okay. I've said to several older pastors who were like, so and so asked me to come back and do the funeral, and I've said to those pastors, remember the new pastor. Remember the new pastor. But I also say to new pastors, don't get bent out of shape about who did a funeral. Don't do that. Give yourself some room, and then the pastor who has retired can also give you some room. They can also give you some room. Another thing I would say too, if you want to stay, is stop sweating the small stuff. Stop sweating the small stuff. And so much of what goes on in churches and organizations, period, is small stuff. And we turn it into something big. And it might help you to go read that book. Don't sweat the small stuff. You know, you wanted the bulletin done a certain way, and something got changed. Don't sweat that. You know, certain people you thought should have shown up for a meeting or an occasion and they didn't, don't sweat that. Don't sweat that. Also, if you want to stay long and you're following a long term pastor, make sure that you spend a great deal of time in prayer about the future of that church and where it needs to go. Because what has really happening um, in so many churches is that because pastors stayed until they were 70 or 80, the churches really went down numerically, and the budgets too. They really went down. And so you're coming in as someone who has to rebuild all of that. And that can be very, very difficult. But if you want to stay, part of your success will be the rebuilding. It will be the rebuilding. Let me say, someone said, great pastor in church while I lived there really grew me spiritually. Okay, okay. Pastor to do the funeral, you still show up. No doubt. No doubt. If they want, not they called somebody else and etc. All of that, and I'm not going. That's absurd. Don't sweat that small stuff. Don't sweat that small stuff. Life is too short. Okay. Life is too short. So like I said, also for those of you who are new, that first 3 to 5 years and etc., assess yourself as well. Assess yourself, and hopefully you've got a team of folk around you who can give you some good assessment, and not just your boys or your girls who are telling you you are great. Okay. But some people around you who can tell you, no, man, that didn't make sense, or no, that was raggedy. I was just talking to a preacher a few days ago, and I asked if he said he was going to let his associates preach. And so I said, well, have you looked at their sermons? And he said, no, I'm tired. And I told him, no, 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 no. You can't do that. You're responsible for that pulpit. And I know you're tired, but you really do need to look at those sermons before they go forth. Those little things end up mattering. They end up mattering. Okay. And then God knows when you've done your best. When you've done your best, but don't let it be said that you didn't do your best, that you didn't do your best. Okay. So that's one thing. Let me see. Okay. Thank you for watching today's broadcast. If you're on YouTube, again, please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for hitting my Cash App. I'm an independent scholar. Somebody put my Cash App in the chat. Love my work 123. It's that $, love my work 123. And it really helps me do what I do. This is my 9th year. So I've been committed. So I appreciate your generosity as well. And it doesn't matter if it's $5 or $500. People have given both, and all of it is appreciated. Don't forget, join me in April for Dr. Timothy Farmer. He's going to be talking about all things tech. And then we're going to do a broadcast on church mergers, talking to 3 pastors who have done it well. And last but not least, as I always say, share the video. It won't cost you anything. Share the video, and this video will help some people. God bless. Hope you all have a great week. And I started to say, don't think something is wrong if it takes a moment for the broadcast to go off. That's a Restream Facebook thing. It just lingers. But I've ended the stream. God bless. Have a great week, everyone.